What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Gotta Get Back, the Samurai Jack in Review Show. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to Project Potter, guys. This is Season 1, Episode 11. If you haven't seen the show before, guys, it's a quick recap. It's a score out of 10. It's a favorite character, and it's a favorite scene, and then maybe some Easter eggs at the end. This is Samurai Jack. We are still in Season 1, as I mentioned, and here we go. Okay, guys, so this is Jack and the Scotsman, and we begin this episode with Jack, and he is doing what he always does. Usually he's going down sort of like a mountain area or like a forest in this case. It's windy. He's alone. He comes across this huge drawbridge, like enormous drawbridge, where there's these huge boulders basically that are holding this drawbridge up. And so Jack is kind of like the bridge like starts up at the top and just goes down. And it's really steep, and it's a really long bridge. And it's super foggy and misty. It looks really cool. And we don't know how long this bridge is. And Jack is like slowly going, and he's like holding on to the sides, and he's like slowly putting his legs forward. And he kind of goes like this for a bit. He looks back, and then he realizes like, all right, I'm just going to go for it. And, you know, he keeps going. And then there's one step where he takes a step and it falls through, and he like has to hold himself back up. There's a weird moment, I thought, where like he gets through. We find out this is a very long bridge. But like it shows the sun at the top, and then it shows like the time passing, and then it's the middle of the night. And so Jack like decides to like rest in the middle of the bridge, and the wood is like old and creaky, and he starts literally like he's falling asleep, and he starts literally falling through. And at the last second, he like puts his hand up, and his sword basically saves his life and holds him up. He hops back up there. They're still super foggy. The bridge is still going. You got to think like Jack has been going for so long on this bridge, but this has got to be like the longest bridge I've ever seen. I couldn't believe how long it was, but it's just long enough for one person. But Jack keeps going, and it's like foggy all around him, and he starts hearing this music. And then this is where we get the Scotsman. And the Scotsman's playing the bagpipes, and he's got like a really cool like cat amulet or whatever, like a belt buckle. And he's just eccentric and great. And the guy that voices him is Joe DiMaggio, and he does a great job because all of his lines are just so good. Basically, Jack is like covering his ears, and he gets there, and he's like, "Please stop!" He's like, "Stop playing your music," and he's like, "Oh, you must like it." And then they have like this back and forth where he says like, "You know, you're in my way. I need to get that way," and he's like, "Okay, well, you step aside, and I'll go that way." And he's like, "I'm not gonna step aside." Or he's like, "I'm not gonna risk falling off for a perfect stranger." And then they start talking about how, like, you know, they both have bounties on each other. The Scotsman says, like, you know, big talk from a guy who wears a basket on his head, which he's wearing this hat here. And he says, like, you know what? I'm going to go that way. And he's like, I can't go back because that's going to waste too much time. He's like, time is something I do not have right now. And then Scotsman just not backing down. He's like, dude, I'm not afraid of you. And he takes out a sword, and he's like, you think that's a sword? He's like, this is a sword. And he like goes to like kind of push it down on Jack. And Jack is holding his sword up, and he's kind of like deflecting it, but he's like with one hand, he's just strong enough, but it cuts his hat in half, and his hat goes down. And he's like, oh, are you going to have a funeral for your hat now, laddie? And they're just kind of like arguing, and then they start fighting, and they're kind of just messing with each other and toying with each other. The Scotsman is like hacking at Jack, and he's deflecting everything, and he pushes Jack back. But then Jack fights back, and then his sword is really fast, and the Scotsman's kind of surprised. And then he goes back, and they just fight for like hours and hours. And then eventually it cuts to them, and they're both exhausted. And he's like, lay down your sword. And he's like, no, I will not. Jack's like, I'm going to defend my ground. And he's like, defend your ground. He's like, you can't even pick up your sword. And so they are just like both super stubborn and both equally matched, like talent-wise, pretty much, and they're not going to give up. And so then these like huge like machine things come, and these are just bounty hunters, I think. And we saw in the past how Jack has a bounty against him. Now the Scotsman reveals that he has a bunch of bounties against him. So Aku is out for both of them. And so all of the bounty hunters in any surrounding area are all coming for them. And so there's two guys on these big wheels, and they can't go left and they can't go right. And they're like, all right, we need to do something. We need to figure out a plan. And Jack does, I forgot to mention too, Jack does like stab the bagpipe. And that's kind of what gets them to start fighting there. He does mention that there's magic runes on his sword, which is why Jack's attack doesn't shatter his sword. But yeah, eventually there's like these two, like pig guy and like this bandit with like old beard. I don't even know how to describe it. But they're like, no, they're coming after me. No, they're coming after me. And they put their hands up, and then someone throws shackles, like handcuffs on them, and it gets both of their hands, so they're actually handcuffed together. And so that makes a fun dynamic because they literally can't escape each other now. So they have to learn to work together. These guys are both coming in from both sides of the bridge, and then they're like, okay, well, let's jump off the edge. And he's like, okay, and Scotsman jumps right. Jack jumps left, and he's like, of course, a guy like with a basket or whatever. He's like, of course you're going to jump left. He's like, everyone knows you jump right. And so Jack just cuts the floor, and so they fall a long ways into like swampy area, and so they survive the fall, obviously, but then they get back up, and then the same bounty hunters, or like the same style of character, are down there, and they're kind of cutting through. One is using Jack's using a sword, Scotsman is using his sword, and he's talking about, who's after me, and it's kind of just repeating the same things. But they go into like this town, and then all of the bounty hunters are after them. They're hiding like an outhouse, and then they blow them up. And they're trying to fight, but they keep going the opposite way, and they can't reach each other with a sword. And Jack is like, look, we are formidable together, but he's like, shackled together, we are useless. And they're like, you're right. We need to get like out of these chains or whatever. And this pig sheriff, he like fires a huge cannon, or like a huge bullet. I don't even know what it is. And they like aim it so that they hold their handcuffs up, and it hits that, and they free them. And then they just start kicking ass. They start destroying everyone, and the bounty hunters are like on the run. The Scotsman like shoots with his leg. His leg is like a machine gun. And so we don't know what happened there, but his left leg is a machine gun. So he starts shooting people with that. They're cutting all these robot lizards, and they're just wreaking havoc on everyone. But they're like, hey, I was wrong about you. That was a pretty good mashup there. They have like a little laugh, and then it's kind of just like a friendship is born, and that's how the episode ends. Okay, guys, for a magic sword, it's got to be the Scotsman. What a great personality. I didn't try and impersonate any accents here, but he was great, and he's like a new ally that Jack has, and we find out he's got all the bounties against him too, so that's probably going to bring more trouble than it's worth for Jack, but at least for one episode they team up, and they kind of form an unlikely alliance because they have to work together to not only survive, but also they respect each other on a fighting level. So the Scotsman was great, voice great, the way that they meet on the bridge, and the way he's just like so in Jack's face and not afraid of anything is great. So he gets my magic sword for this week. For Portal in Time, I would say any of the shots on the bridge are great. I especially love with the fog there. I love when Jack looks back at the fog, and he's like, that's going to waste too much time. But just like the bridge itself, it's so skinny and it's great, and they're right in the middle of nowhere and they can't go anywhere. So I thought that was all beautifully animated. And any of the shots on the bridge have got to be my favorite scenes of this episode for sure. For a score for this one, guys, I liked it. It was okay. There wasn't too many action shots or too many crazy shots. Excuse me. There were a bunch of action shots. There weren't too many shots that really blew me away. The idea of the bridge was really cool, especially considering how long it was and how long Jack went. I'd like to know what was at the other end of that bridge or whatever, where the Scotsman's coming from. So that was cool, and there's apparently no other way to get around there as well. So, but yeah, I'm going to give this one a 7.7. I thought it was all right. I mean, the Scotsman is great, but they just fought a bunch of no-name bounty hunters, and I don't know, there wasn't like any mention of a coup, or there was a mention of a coup. I don't know. It was just an all right episode. I don't really have too much to say about it, honestly. And now for Jack Facts this week, guys, we don't have any Jack Facts for this one. So we'll try again next week. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That's another episode of Gotta Get Back. This has been episode 11 now. So we have 2 more to go in season 1. This one was okay. It wasn't super fast paced. I actually liked last episode and episode 10 a lot more. But it's a solid episode, and I really like certain aspects, and the Scotsman is now introduced, and so he's a fun character in the world. But yeah, this has been episode 11 of Gotta Get Back, the Samurai Jack in review. I've been your host, Kyle. Like, comment, subscribe, guys, if you enjoyed the content at all. If you didn't enjoy it, sorry, I tried, but go check out the other content on the channel. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff on there. Ring that bell notification, you guys already know, and until next time, guys, gotta get back.